Welcome back, everyone, to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras, and as every week, I'm joined by my co host, Glenn Highcove, who is joining me all the way from California. How are you feeling, man?
Hey, doing great. Happy holidays. This is one of my favorite times of the year. So, yeah, super happy. Just getting ready and staying busy.
Definitely, dude. It's definitely getting cold here in Lithuania. How about in Cali? Is it any colder now?
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like for some reason it's extra windy during a time of year when normally it's not. But then it's also really weird where it'll be like close to 80 during the day. And then at night it'll be in the 40s. So it's probably the time of the year where we have some of the biggest temperature differentials.
Gotcha, man.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm also definitely excited for the holiday season. So yeah, without any further ado, man, I think you want to introduce the case that we're covering this week, right?
Yeah. So, our premise this week is I think one of the most disturbing things that can happen in a family, other than, of course, the ultimate disturbing thing, which would be like a death in the family or a murder in the family, but probably the really close runner up is when a young person in a family leaves, and I think it's disturbing for a lot of reasons. If you're a parent, it's disturbing to think like, well, what made my child reject the family situation they were in? What made them kind of leave the safety of the home and go out there into the unknown? Um, and it's funny too because I was thinking like I don't know. I mean, did you when you were a little kid, did you ever like either threaten to run away or like kind of like harbor fantasies in your mind, like if your mom and dad got mad at you or spanked you or something? Like did you
Definitely.
ever? I think every kid does that. I'm gonna run away, but like almost no kids do. I
Yeah.
mean, and unfortunately, there is a very small subset. But the thing is, I think when you look at it statistically, almost all the runaways happen, I would say, from let's say like the early teens. So maybe around age 12 and on. And that's, I think, when probably a child has reached some degree of physical maturity and maybe some sense of independence. They've gone through that major mental change that children go through, depending on whether boys or girls. So, you know, it, so I think what happens is when a child runs away at a much younger age, just like when a child does anything at a much younger age, like I think what some of the worst things to think about is when not just when teens when teenagers kill themselves, but when really young children kill themselves, it's extra disturbing. And I think this is the same kind of thing where when a really young child runs away and makes like a serious attempt, like not just didn't just run away next door or run out of the house for 10 minutes or an hour and kind of cool off. I mean, obviously people need to get out of emotional situations, but when a young child make plans deliberately to leave and like packs their bags, let's say, and you know like sets out to make a voyage and there's not and when there isn't any kind of obvious reason for it, I think it's super disturbing. And I think what's even more disturbing though is when suddenly that same child seems to have suddenly disappeared into thin air. I mean, there's a lot disturbing about that because it really makes you kind of feel like children really are as vulnerable as everyone is as worried that they are. You know what I mean? It reminds me there's a old Looney Tunes cartoon with like a mother like a not a goose like a swan, a mother swan, and there's a bunch of like her little goslings behind her, and she turns her back for a second and this vulture comes and like takes all of them. And there's videos like that too where some poor duck will like lose like her entire brood. And it does make you think like, wow, like nature or like these forces of evil or whatever disruption are just waiting for you to turn your back for 2 seconds. I think what's unfortunate is the case that we're going to talk about today. It really starts to make you really erode your trust in society because we're going to talk about not even a young woman, a young girl who wasn't even a teenager yet, and she disappeared. And she seems to, I mean, like no joke, everyone was on top of it right away, and she still seems to have disappeared into thin air.
Exactly, man.
So yeah.
Definitely, we're gonna be talking about the disappearance of Asha Degree. So she was basically a 9-year-old girl from North Carolina. She lived nearby to the small town of Shelby, and she has disappeared in the early morning hours of February 14th in the year of 2000. Now, these reasons why she disappeared are really mysterious. As you said, it's almost like there was no catalyst for her disappearing act. We don't really know why she did it, but what we do know is that she actually packed her book bag, left her family home north of the city of Shelby, and began walking along the nearby North Carolina Highway 18. And she was walking in the south direction, which would actually lead her, I believe, 12 miles in that direction to the city of Shelby. Some people think that she was walking towards Shelby. We will get into this. Now, one thing to mention here, this little girl was allegedly really scared of the dark and really scared of storms. And now she walked out at around 3 to 4 a.m., early morning hours, into a storm when it's really dark outside. And she was really underdressed. She was only wearing a long sleeve shirt. Surely it was a lot colder than, she was dressed for. And pretty much she was spotted actually by two drivers walking down, Highway 18. When one of them stopped and called for her, she suddenly became really scared and she ran into the woods. Now, she didn't really run into like massive woods, even though North Carolina is filled with woods. It was just like the sort of tree line that would follow a highway, so it wasn't real woods. Now we know that she ran towards a certain shed of a certain local business, and she potentially have stayed there for around 30 minutes. We don't know if she was alone at that point. And then later, 18 months, when things have passed and the case got really cold, even though it still was investigated really heavily, her book bag turned up 38 miles, I believe, away from her last place of where she was sighted, and in the exact opposite direction that she was walking towards, because she was walking towards Shelby in the southward direction. Her book bag was found way in the northward direction. And also in 2016, a new lead came about that is pretty significant because the police reported it, and they say that someone potentially saw her entering into a green, old school Ford sedan type of vehicle. So that's pretty much the case. It's crazy, and I think we are about to jump into the background of Asha Degree, and I think you want to take over a little bit in terms of the background, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably the first question whenever anybody hears about, let's say, a teenager or a younger person running away. There's a lot of, let's say, fingers pointing at their living situation, and that's not without reason. I mean, it's definitely not unheard of for a lot of runaways to come from homes that are broken or that have abuse or something else going on. But I think what's really fascinating and alarming about this case is that there's nothing really obvious like that present here. So, really quickly, we'll go into her background. Her parents, uh, their names are Harold and Aquila Degree, and they married on Valentine's Day in 1988, which is pretty romantic. And their first child, their son, was born about a year after that, and then Asha was born the year after that. So two kids right in a row, pretty quickly into the marriage, and they were known as I think pretty conservative and traditional folks, with like really good morals and strong family values. I guess is the way you would think about it. People that really believed in, I think, a lot of traditional, let's say, American or Midwest family values. And they raised both of their children in their house that was on Oakcrest Drive. It's in a residential subdivision in a generally rural area, like you mentioned. There's woods, but it's like almost just tree lines to separate like farm properties if you look at it in the map, with little gatherings of woods here and there, but a lot of it's been developed for, let's say, like agriculture and suburban housing. And they lived in the western edge of the Charlotte metropolitan area. And I'll just say, I've heard only good things about Charlotte, North Carolina. It's supposed to be a really nice place to live. Both of them were working parents. That's not unusual, especially today's day and age. But even back then, you need two parents to pay the rent. And because of this, both children were somewhat autonomous. So they were, I guess, what you would call latchkey kids. And they had pretty strong expectations from the parents that they would kind of run themselves when they weren't kind of doing the other activities that we'll mention. So they, when the parents came home from work, the expectation was both of them would be working on their homework or finish with it by the time they returned. Now, some people might listen to that and say, oh, well, how do you keep them from going on the internet and messing around? Well, turns out, this is right around what, 2000?
Yeah.
So this is, the early days of the internet. For sure it was around, but I will say, I mean, like, I lived in Los Angeles, and I was one of the only people I knew that had DSL at the time. So first of all, broadband internet was not a common thing. It was really hard to get like a good internet connection. You were basically doing 56K modems unless you lived in like a super metropolitan area, and they certainly didn't. But on top of that, her family was not what you would call early adopters of the internet. I wouldn't even call them like middle of the curve adopters. They definitely had a very conservative outlook on the internet. I think they were very much, like I said, centered around like the church and their school and family life, and they did not even have a computer in the house. And this was in part because, even back then in the early internet days, there were these predators who were using, sometimes you call it social hacking, but people that were kind of doing like the internet pervert version of catfishing to fool little children and teenagers into running away. And this is, of course, nothing new. I mean, that's been around forever, but the internet massively amplified the reach of people who had bad designs on other people's children and teenagers. So, this was because of the stereotype of the internet, maybe not without good reason. Asha's parents didn't want any part of it. And on top of this, Asha was not someone who seemed to be very curious about that anyway. Apparently her personality itself was what we call conservative. And I don't mean conservative politically, I mean conservative like you're not looking for novelty. So she was known to be very cautious, very shy. She was apparently scared of dogs.
Yeah.
No wonder. When you're a kid, a dog looks like a monster, right?
Exactly.
So, and I remember I always laugh because even when I was like I remember like I didn't grow up with a dog, but I had a dog starting about age 10, at which point, you get to be less scared of dogs because you kind of understand them. But I remember like having friends that were my size, and I'm a decent size, friends that would come over who didn't have dogs. And like my dog was such a like wimp. And they'd be like, "Oh, nice doggy, nice." You know what I mean? They would be like scared of my little dog. So
yeah,
it is kind of funny. I don't see Asha being less scared of dogs as she gets older, unless she would actually own one. And apparently, she was even kind of a, I mean, there was the parents' thought was that she would never be the one that would go do something adventurous outside of the house without, basically being urged on. So okay, she was in fourth grade at the nearby elementary school, which is called Falston. And, they were interestingly going into a 3-day weekend on the second week of February
I
2000.
think I
So,
just want to step in for one
yeah.
second. I think there's a big misconception here because some people are stating that it was some sort of a no school day, or nah, it was like the president day or something like that, because some people state that it was the president day. That's why Friday was a no school day, but apparently it actually was a school teacher day because the president day
Uh,
fall on another date. So I think that was the
yeah,
case.
pupil free day. Yeah. Oh boy, I used to love those. My kid gets those too.
Wow.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, it's like a kind of like a teacher planning day, which means no school for the kids. So, yeah. So yeah, just like you said, because it wasn't like a national holiday, um, mommy and daddy, degree still had to go to work while the children spent the day at their aunt Alicia's house. And Alicia lived right in the same neighborhood, so that was convenient. And then the other thing that was really big in Asha and her brother's life was youth basketball. So apparently, this was like, this was if there was only two or three things going on in their life between like school and church, it was this basketball league. And, she was actually a star point guard, and they lost the following day after this visit to the aunts. They lost their first game of the season.
Could we
So
just step in
yeah.
here, because I think this will be an important this for our audience. This is going to be very important to understand the timeline. So basically, the no school day is on Friday. Now they spend that Friday, as you've said, at Alicia's house, their aunt's house, who apparently also lived with their grandmother. So also with their grandmother, they spent that Friday, I guess, after just when the parents were still working, but because the parents don't get an off day. And now on Saturday they actually go and play that game. Now they play that game because O'Brien and Asia, basically, they had consecutive games. So the first game was Asia's, the second one was from O'Brien, and they were actually with their parents at that point. So I just want to mention this fact that it's on a Saturday that they play the game. On a Sunday they do like I guess Valentine's Day activities, because it was the Valentine's Day at that point. And then Sunday in the midnight, pretty much, well, you could pretty much say Monday early morning hours of Monday, Aisha disappears. So just I think you could definitely continue on from the from the basketball game, but I just wanted to build up this timeline for the audience. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So yeah, I mean, from that timeline, they play their game. First game of the season, Asha fouls out, and I think maybe she might have been a little bit of a perfectionist. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, she had high standards for herself, let's say. And, like, I guess this is probably why I never liked to do team sports at that age, because there's a lot of pressure. Like, if you mess up, you're not just messing up for yourself, you're messing up for everyone else. And, when the star player fouls out, that sets the team back, and maybe opens up opportunity for the other team. So, anyways, they cried. um, her whole team did. And then, she seems to have gotten over it, and she watched I guess her brother played his team's game right after that.
Yeah.
So, and this was, like I said, it was one of the characteristics about her was that, that her parents described this also in an interview, I think, that I saw on YouTube later that followed up on this case somewhat later, was that she was known as being very eager to please to everyone. I think this is a key thing to think about later on in this narrative. But she was super helpful, and I can't help but wonder if this was also a source of stress in your life, because it's very hard to do well by everybody. So on one hand, it's very commendable to always be thinking of other people, but it's also like a burden.
Yeah.
And I also wonder if that makes that person more susceptible to, maybe trying to please somebody who you don't realize doesn't have like a good outcome planned for you. So anyway, food for thought. And then on top of this, she was scared of dogs, and she was also scared of storms and the dark. Yet, as we're gonna find out, she seems to have braved both that very night, right
Exactly.
after this.
Right. So I think we could jump into the disappearance. So, right. Just last thing to reiterate here is that that basketball game happens on Saturday. She's really upset after losing that game on Saturday. Now, she later on Saturday, she was watching O'Brien's basketball game. And, allegedly, according to her parents and pretty much everyone who saw her, later on in Saturday, she's already feeling good about it. So I definitely don't buy it that her disappearance was caused by the basketball game. Um, you know, Next day comes Sunday, they go to church. They first arrive at Alicia's home, their aunt's home. They stay at Alicia's home for a little while, I assume. They go to the church. They come back from the church. They still stay at Alicia's home. Now, one important fact is that Harold, the children's father, has to go and work his second job, so late night shift, and he would only return to the house at 12:30 at night. So pretty much they stay at the grandmother's house for a little bit. That's pretty much when she is reportedly given candy by the grandmother. She seems really happy about the candy. Everyone's feeling happy, even though she later on disappears in the day. Now, on February 13th, so basically, I'm talking about that Sunday that, she went missing in the midnight, shortly after midnight. So I have here that, yeah, after they go to church from Alicia's house, everyone returns to Alicia's home. O'Brien and Aisha receives Valentine's Day candy from their grandmother Joanne. Aisha was excited to receive the candy and seemed overall really happy. So I have it marked down that, no one's reporting any suspicious behavior from Aisha at that point. Now, Aisha O'Brien and their mother Aquila return home shortly after that. As I've mentioned before, Harold had to work late at his second job that day. He would only be present at home right at around 12:30, in the midnight, I guess. Now, let's bring it back before that a little bit, around 8 p.m., when the family members, minus Harold, had returned home to Aisha's home pretty much at around 8 p.m. that night. Both children went to bed in the room they shared. It's a very important fact that they shared a room. Almost 1 hour later, the power went out in the neighborhood, so that would be 9 p.m. I don't really buy it. There are some reports stating that the power actually went out at 6 p.m. because one of the things to mention here is that Aquila wanted to bathe the children right after they got back from the grandmother's and Aisha's home, but she couldn't do it because the power was out. And if the kids go to bed at 8 p.m. and the power is out at 9 p.m., the power outage would not really interfere with the bathing plans that Aquila had. So pretty much, I believe the other report stating that the power went out at 6 p.m. is more interesting. Now the power outage was caused due to a accident. A car drove into I believe, electrical poles or something like that. Some crazy accident. Now, it was a car accident pretty much. So the power came back on at 12:30 a.m. So pretty much right at the same time when Harold got back home, or just a little bit after he got back home. Another thing to mention here is that Harold, after he went back home at apparently 12:30 a.m., he immediately checked upon his kids, where he saw Aisha and O'Brien at 12 2:30 a.m., still in their beds. He apparently went and watched TV because, it would seem pretty crazy for a person to watch TV at 12:30 a.m. But let's remember, Harold had like night shifts. He had like two jobs. So pretty much when you're working at that schedule, you're probably doing all sorts of things like that. Now, he checked again shortly before he went to bed. That would be 2:30 a.m. So this gives us a good timestamp. It's really good that Harold was checking on his kids, because we at least know like the time frame and things like that. I am a little bit suspicious, why is Harold checking upon his kids a lot, but maybe since he's woken up, maybe it's a normal thing, I don't know. So to 2:30 a.m., Aisha and O'Brien is sleeping in their beds, and everything is as normal as it could be. So this is really strange. Is Aisha in the back of her head thinking about disappearing? I don't really know. Now let's move into the timeline. O'Brien, who was 10 years of age, and Aisha was 9. I don't think we mentioned this before. Now O'Brien sees Aisha standing up and going to the bathroom. Then she returns to bed again. I believe this was around 3 a.m. The clearer timeline, I think we have a point in the shared file when we want to talk about it, so I think I'll talk about it then. So shortly afterwards, O'Brien recalls hearing Asha's bed squeak. So let's put this into, let's look at it from distance a little bit. So O'Brien, at around 3 a.m., hears Aisha going to the bathroom. He visually sees her going to the bathroom, or at least standing up, and then she returns to the bed, and O'Brien sees her do these things. So O'Brien thinks, oh, she just went to the bathroom, now she's in bed, let's go back to bed. But shortly after that sighting, O'Brien recalls hearing Asha's bed squeak. This is very interesting and important. Now, at that point, O'Brien already witnessed Asha going to the bathroom, so he's probably thinking, this is, another, either she's going to the bathroom or she's just changing her sleep position. I'm not gonna pay too much attention to what's happening. I'm just gonna continue on sleeping. Now, while he did not further arouse himself, raise any suspicions, because he assumed she was merely changing positions in her sleep, apparently around this time, Asha actually got out of bed, taking a book bag she had previously packed with several sets of clothing and personal items, and left the house. Now, the actual items, we don't really know what she packed, but we do know what was later found in the book bag. We'll get into it shortly. Now, between 3:45 a.m. and 4:15 a.m., a truck driver and a motorist saw her walking south along Highway 18, wearing a long-sleeve white t-shirt and white pants just north of its junction with Highway 1800. So basically, let's look at the Google Earth right now. The sightings happened at around Debbie Turner's upholstery. This is a very important location in this case. So we could see that, Asha actually leaves her home in literally the middle of the night in a storm, wearing only long sleeve shirts, and some pants, and carrying her book bag. Well, I think we could definitely mention what was later found in that book bag. Basically, I believe some kid's book was found, and a t-shirt of a boy band called the New Kids on the Block. I actually looked into these guys. They're like super corny, but maybe back in the 80s it was something cool. And yeah, pretty much she walks 1.3 miles when she's spotted in this direction. Dude, give me a second to recollect my information and you could step in
Yeah,
and yeah.
I'll just vamp for a second on the New Kids on the Block. So I only laugh because like they're kind of one of the original, well, at least for the late past 30 years, one of the original boy bands. So before like NSYNC and bands like that, that actually was the same manager. I think he had the same formula. New Kids on the Block was huge, and I only laughed because you said the corny thing, and it like it was like one of those bands that like all the teenage girls loved them, and like all the teenage boys hated them. So, like, when you said something even slightly bad about them, I was like, oh, that's just like when I was like a teenager and like everybody was crapping on them. But they were actually at one point, even like years after like they were super popular, they were still like one of the biggest acts in the concert scene. So they were huge. And actually, Donnie Wahlberg was one of the members of it. So Mark Wahlberg's older brother.
Oh,
Yeah,
wait,
yeah.
because dude, I was going through who the people were in that band, and I was like, yo, everyone in that band looks like Mark Wahlberg. I was like, what the hell? But
Yeah,
I didn't know. I didn't know about the connection.
yeah, they're like the same neighborhood. I mean, well, obviously Donnie, Mark are from the same house, but yeah, they were like, yeah. It was so Mark actually got. I guess I would assume he got his start from his brother, first getting famous, and
Wow.
just if you've ever seen Sixth Sense, Donnie Wahlberg did a really great acting job, actually, an amazing acting job playing the mental patient in the beginning of the movie who attacks Bruce Willis.
Oh, oh
Yep.
goddamn. Oh
Yeah.
goddamn. Okay,
Yeah. That's him, the skinny guy. Yeah.
that's some movie knowledge right there. Yeah, so pretty much I have recollected all of my information. I could definitely go on in the disappearance now. These people that actually spotted, Aisha walking in the middle of the night, uh, in the southward direction, obviously they were sort of, distraught about the sighting. And one of them actually, as I've said, had to, because it was a really dark and rainy day, he had to like spun around a few times just to like see where Aisha was. That just sort of gives us, I guess, an idea of how dark it was. But he manages to park his vehicle next to where Aisha was at that point, walking in the southward direction, actually towards the Shelby area. Now, one thing to mention here is, I know I'm giving a lot of information, but I just don't want to forget any details. Now, this direction that she was walking southward actually was the same path that her school bus was driving every morning. So I think she definitely was somewhat familiar, even though it was the middle of the night. I think she definitely was somewhat familiar with the area because, her school bus drove through the same Highway 18. Now, the vehicle driver that had stopped actually called for Aisha. At that point, she suddenly became really scared and ran into the tree line area. And apparently, this dude who saw her just left it be. This is the other interesting thing, is that both of these people who witnessed, her walking down Highway 18 only reported the disappearance after seeing it on TV. Because at the same morning, when the family members discovered that Aisha is not there at around 6:30 a.m. in the morning, at the same day of that evening of that day, in the evening of that day, the media had already been covering the story heavily. And I only believe like maybe like a day later or something like that, these people tell about the sighting. Now that's pretty interesting. I feel like if I saw a 9-year-old looking girl, really young, underdressed, walking down Highway 18 at 4 a.m., I'd probably be calling the cops, but maybe they were like busy, they had things to do. So I'm not gonna, crap on them too much. I mean, at least they reported the sighting. They could have potentially not even reported any sightings, and we would have no information in this case at all. So at least we have that. Now, just to sort of give a little, just to paint a picture of how the morning looked like at Ash's home. So basically, Aquila woke up at 5:45 a.m., a little bit earlier than usual because she had plans to bathe the children in the morning, because she couldn't do that, the day previous when they returned from the grandmother's home because, the power was out. Now she goes into the children's room and things like that. She sees that O'Brien was in his bed, but Asha wasn't. So she was unable to find her in the house or in the family cars. At first, she wasn't super, like worried because she thought that maybe she already woke up and she was somewhere in the house. When she couldn't locate her in the house, she rushed towards Harold, and Harold actually called, I believe, Alicia and the grandmother. Now they said that Aisha was not at their home, and then this is Aquila's quote. That's when I went into panic mode. I heard a car next door. I put shoes on and ran outside. So basically, that's pretty much it. Now, this car that she's mentioning was just some random car. She maybe thought that at that point Aisha could be in that car. We later, found out that that was just some random car and things like that. So that's pretty much the disappearance. I don't know, man. Before we jump into the investigation section of this, I guess, episode, you wanna, I don't know, mention anything about, like, this is a crazy disappearance. You have to agree that there's no catalyst. What is going on here, man?
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird. I mean, it seems like it was just like totally unexpected with like the like the least likely person in the household to do it. I mean, you know what I mean? Like if anything, if anybody was going to be up to that, something like that, you think, oh, maybe like a boy would do that, something dumb like that. I have a daughter, so I having a daughter is wacky enough, but like sons, I used to be a son, and I used to do some pretty wacky things and dumb things. But yeah, I guess the other crazy thing is look how like the timing is so tight. Like there isn't a lot of time between when the father stops checking, and watching TV to when the mother gets up. I mean, there's only a tiny, like maybe 2 hour window, which it almost makes you wonder if the routine around this was so regimented that she knew exactly when she would have to, you know what I mean, get out of the house
Exactly.
with
It's
her stuff.
crazy.
Like, yeah, it's like an amazingly timed escape plan because anything, like any overlap and it doesn't go wrong. And here and like, but by the way, it's not like everybody slept in, right?
Yeah.
Like right away they're on top of this.
Because
So
it's the school day.
yeah,
Next day is school day, so everyone's
yeah.
waking up early. Now let's jump into the investigation. So basically, by 6:40 a.m. in the morning, the first police officers had arrived on the scene. So really fast. Let's remember this fact. Because Aquila realizes that, Aisha is missing at 6:30. 10 minutes later, police is on the scene. So police reacted real quick. Police dogs called to the scene could not pick up Aisha's scent. Some people are stating that's because it was raining heavily and that could potentially affect the nasal capabilities of canines and things like that. I've seen some conflicting reports. Some people actually state that it's even better for dogs. I'm not really gonna get into it because I'm not really a dog expert. Now Aquila went through the neighborhood calling Aisha's name, which she said she had awakened everyone by 7 a.m. So actually by 7 a.m., friends, family, and neighbors had canceled their plans for the day to assist police in searching the vicinity while the pastor of their church, along with other area clergymen, came to the Degree's home to support them. Now, by the day's end, all that had been found was a mitten, which Aquila Degree said not belong to her daughter. A lot of people are sort of thinking, why is Aquila so fast to decline that is, mitten that belonged to a her daughter? Why is she so fast to deny that? Well, I think it's pretty normal. I mean, the Degrees were not a super wealthy family. They didn't have a lot of stuff that they could, just not recall or something like that. So one thing to mention here is that police at this point believes that Aisha had pre-planned this thing days before she vanished, and also Aisha's parents find this hard to believe because they don't really have any catalyst, they don't really see one, right? One thing to mention here is because I definitely don't want to cast any suspicion on the family members, because for people who are listening to the story for the first time, they're analyzing everything as I've as I'm talking, and they're pretty much thinking, could the parents be involved? I just want to mention a quick thing that the parents have actually kept the search going. They have like created scholarships in the name of their missing daughter. They have turned her room into a shrine because the family members still live in the inside of the same home. O'Brien, Aisha's brother, has a daughter now. He says that that daughter looks really like just like Aisha. It's uncanny, and they're all like sort of seem like really good people, and they are dreading the loss of their daughter. So it's not like I'm definitely want to just put this thing right out that the family members were definitely not involved as far as I'm concerned. So just to not arouse any suspicion that the family members might know something. Now by the evening of the first day of Aisha's disappearance, the media already had grabbed the story and covered it extensively. Aquila pleads for information on TV, urges whomever has Aisha to bring her back. So she's at that point thinking someone snatched her up, someone snatched Aisha. Local news coverage prompted the two drivers who had seen Aisha walking along the road early that morning, including the one whose attempt to approach her apparently prompted Aisha to flee into the woods to report the sighting to police, as I've mentioned before. The two witnesses say they saw Aisha during early morning hours on February 14th, walking along Highway 18, which is just basically a two-lane rural road. We have also the fact that Aisha's school bus was driving in the same highway, so she may have been familiar with the surroundings. I also have some information that I really wanted to mention here is that back in the early 2000s, these rural roads actually in North Carolina were heavily traveled, but they were very poorly lit, if lit at all. So, you would probably, when you see it, you would think no cars actually pass through here, but there's a bunch of cars passing through there actually. Now, these roads are hard to navigate at night. So let's remember this because this could definitely play into the theory that she was a victim of a hit and run because, it's hard to see a 9-year-old child, a small 9-year-old child, at like 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, the witnesses actually recall seeing Asha walking down that highway somewhere between 3:30 a.m. and 4:15 a.m. So we know it's pitch black dark still. Aisha lived a couple of miles away from the main stretch of Shelby. So some people are stating now, if we jump back to the Google Earth real quick, some people are stating that she may have been walking towards the direction of, the main town called Shelby that was in that area. I find it hard to believe because she would have to walk. What do you think, man? How long is this? If Aisha's home and Debbie Turner's upholstery is like 1.3 miles away, this is like a good 10 miles. Would you expect a 9-year-old child to potentially decide to walk 10 miles into the city? Do you think that's a logical estimation?
No, that's a really long walk, even for an adult. I mean, and then given that weather and, like you said, rough roads. I mean, I can't imagine they have sidewalks. They probably, if anything, if it's a farming community, there's probably ditches on the side of the road, right, for rain
Exactly.
and other stuff. So yeah, I can't. I mean,
Right.
that and it's not like she did this before all the time. It's not like she was in Girl Scouts or something, going on hikes all the time, right?
Nah, she definitely wasn't. Now, one witness uh, says he managed to stop his vehicle near Aisha, as I've mentioned. Now, she got really spooked and ran into a nearby woods and discovered. Now, as I've said, the woods were not thick. They were more of a thicket of trees on both sides of the highway. Now, one interesting fact is that we do have some information where she later ends up. So this sighting of, pretty much where she was seen getting spooked and running into the tree line, it happened 1.3 miles away. Now on February 15th, though, I believe on this, like pretty much on the same day when everyone's like sort of looking through. Oh, I'm sorry, the next day, candy wrappers were found in a shed at a nearby business called the Turner's Upholstery, Debbie Turner's Upholstery, this area right here. So this is why I have it marked. Some people might be thinking, why do I have this area marked? Well, it's because, it's the upholstery. Now, another interesting detail for everyone who's on our YouTube channel, as you can see, I bet you can see this poster as well, man, right? So basically, this poster is says in real life that, Aisha is missing and help find Aisha, because apparently this is also like a place where Aisha was sighted at. Now, Debbie Turner's upholstery that is located in, 1.3 miles away had a shed, and now candy wrappers were found at, the shed. So that's pretty crazy. Another interesting fact that these candy wrappers at this shed were found 36 hours after Aisha disappeared. Along with the candy wrappers that belonged to Aisha, uh, there was a pencil, a marker, and Mickey Mouse shaped hair bow that were identified as belonging to Aisha. It was pretty much the only trace of her found during the initial search. Now, some definitely interesting items were unearthed later on, but at that point, that's all they had. The last thing I want to mention about the Debbie Turner's upholstery, that the owner, I'm assuming Debbie Turner probably, she actually finds these items on February 15th, but they were only reported to the police once police showed up to search the vicinity on February 17th. So Debbie Turner finds these items, she doesn't report them to the police, but the police comes looking at the property at February 17th, which raises a lot of suspicion online for a lot of people, because people are thinking, why did it take police 3 whole days to search the the shed that is literally right next to where she was last seen? So people are weirded out, and apparently when the police finally managed to show up at this shed and do their search, the owner, Debbie Turner, is like, yo, I definitely remember seeing like some kid stuff here, like, a few days ago. You might want to look at these things. And yeah, apparently those things were located right at the doorway of the shed. A lot of people are assuming this is exactly where Aisha ran off when she got spooked and ran into the tree line. She actually then, I guess, to get some cover from the heavy rain, apparently spends around 30 minutes, at least that's what some online investigators think, in this shed, and that's where she spends a little bit of that time. I have some more information that police did not find any signs of struggle outside of the shed. Some people question the police efforts, since it took them a while to get to the shed. Some of the other candy wrappers that apparently belonged to Aisha shortly were found on the sides of Highway 18. So, she was actually probably eating candy while she was walking, which is definitely weird. She was like not acting like it was a serious thing that she was doing. She's like, I'm just gonna walk out into the middle of the night wearing a long sleeve shirt. It's heavy rain. I'm just gonna walk down southwards along this highway and eat candy. It's definitely super bizarre. I mean, before I jump into the next few details, you wanna step in here? You got anything to mention here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they hadn't found some of the other belongings, somebody might play devil's advocate and say, well, they found candy, so what? Like, who says that's her candy? But apparently, I think from the research we did, the other children at the basketball event that she was at said that actually it matched the kind of the selection of candy that the kids were given, like I guess as part of the festivities or part of the game. So it aligned pretty well with candy that maybe she would have had in her possession, and maybe apparently ferreted it away for a later date.
For a rainy day, literally, man. Yeah, let's jump into some other things. Is that the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, the director of that, nonprofit organization, states, as you've mentioned, and we both will agree that this is an important key detail, is that children don't usually run away until they are 12, and Asha was only 9 at this time. Police, however, believe that Asha left the house on her own accord, but later on ran into someone sinister. So, apparently the family members don't believe this because, or at least find it really difficult to believe because there's no catalyst for her to literally walk outside. Everyone's pretty much happy as long as we know. I mean, we don't really know what's going on in that family, but it's heavily reported that it's a really good family. And, like the parents turned her room into a shrine and are actively trying to locate her. I don't think it's a messed up family. I think it's a really good, really good Northern Carolinian family, like true Northern Carolinian spirit or something like that, right? So law enforcement states that this case is hard to track because usually kidnappers stalk their prey, and usually investigators have at least some little clues that the stalkers leave behind, or there's like a person connected or something like that. We have one person connected. I definitely want to talk about it at the ending of this episode. However, on this particular case, at least at that point, the police had very little to work with. Now, I will jump really quickly just to sort of flesh the details out a little bit. I found a really nice Reddit post online. They're pretty much sort of giving us what Aisha potentially was doing, at right after, O'Brien last saw her going back to bed after returning from bathroom in 3 a.m., on the morning hours when she disappeared. Well, apparently, yeah. So let's just go through the uh, hours really quickly. So 2:30 a.m. Harold Degree checks on his two kids, Aisha and O'Brien, before he goes to sleep. Everyone's good. You know what I'm saying? Then O'Brien sees Aisha get up. Now, this Reddit post says that she got up at 2:45 a.m. to go to the bathroom. So 2:45 a.m. She's in the bathroom, right? Now, shortly after that, O'Brien hears her like bed squeak, and this is around 3 a.m. sort of, at least what these people are stating. Now I'm gonna believe them because I bet they did more research than me. So within 15 minutes after returning to the bathroom, she manages to take everything and leave the house. I think this makes sense. Maybe she, before her trip, because that's what I always do, before I go out somewhere, I always make sure that I don't want to, go to the toilet shortly. So maybe that's what she did. She goes to the bathroom and then she returns, but not to go to sleep. Maybe she, I don't know if she pretends to go to bed just so that O'Brien doesn't get any suspicious, but I would almost even assume that she doesn't even care what O'Brien thinks at that point. She just goes back from the bedroom. Maybe O'Brien just thinks that she goes to bed, but she's actually starts packing immediately because 15 minutes in, she already leaves, apparently, the house. Now, she probably left at around 3:05 a.m. is what this Reddit post states. Now, at around 3:25 a.m., she arrives at Debbie Turner's upholstery. So, this 1.3 mile, I guess, little road trip that she took, apparently took her like, I don't know, around 20 minutes to cover. At least that's what the average person would take. Now we have in between 3:45 a.m. and 4:15 a.m. The two vehicle drivers spot her, so we don't really know what she was doing for potentially 20 minutes. It's definitely hazy. I've heard some podcasts about this case. They say that this is definitely a hazy situation. She was probably walking around. Maybe she stopped for a while. Maybe she was waiting for the rain to pass, but the rain doesn't pass up and she decides to move forward. We don't really know what happens then. And pretty much that's the last time, she sighted at around like 3, at around like 4 a.m., I would say. She runs into the tree line, and I would assume she runs somewhere into the shed. So she's in the shed at around 4:30, 4:45 a.m. Maybe she stays there up until 5 a.m. or 5:15 a.m., because she was eating candy. At least we know that she stayed for, at least a few moments to eat the candy and leave the candy wrappers there. It's interesting that for some reason she left those items at the shed, because if you're just stopping there for, you know, to wait until the rain passes, why would you sort of leave items there? It's definitely really weird, and things gonna get even weirder. And then lastly, I wanna say that some people are theorizing. There's this one blog that is heavily theorizing that she ran into someone in the shed, because I mean, this is to some degree that would make sense, because why would she leave those items there? Maybe there was someone else in that shed, maybe a homeless family, a hobo, someone who either abducted her in the shed or pretty much um, convinced her to come along or something like that. I don't really think that was the case at the end of the day, but it's an interesting theory. Before we jump into later developments part, before we completely end off the investigation, anything you want to mention before we jump into the later developments, man?
I mean, it's just maddening the timing because, like, I think I really like how you added all this up. I mean, just in the interest of like things take a certain amount of time. So, like, if she's in the shed around 5 o'clock, I mean, her mom is up like 35 minutes later or less, right?
Wow, wow.
I mean, so what? And then just think the cops are on their way to the house, like at 6:30. So how does somebody even, if she was on foot, how does she not get detected by either the police or any of the many people in the neighborhood who are being woken up by her mom, running up and down the road yelling and, kind of doing the telephone tree thing by getting everybody's attention on this. Like it's maddening, I guess, to think how this could happen.
I mean, in later developments, I think one of these later developments that did end up happening will explain this. So let's actually jump into that. So I'm just gonna quickly go through some important key facts that sort of happened shortly, not necessarily shortly, but in the years following Asha Degree's disappearance. So pretty much at a news conference on February 22, Crawford, which was I believe the lead investigator, said that he was going on a long range with the search of Asia. Both the FBI and North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations got involved and put her on their respective databases of missing children. So serious people were involved in this case. I guess that just shows us that people were really trying to find out what happened to Asha Degree at that point. Now, Aquila's account of what Asha had taken with her, from that account, investigators sort of corroborated with the witnesses that okay, that was definitely Asha, because Asha was apparently reported wearing the same exact items that were missing from the Degree family house. Media attention was went to like national range, like in terms of like the extensiveness that it was reported at. A month after Asha's disappearance, the Degree family appeared on various TV shows such as Montel Williams, Oprah Winfrey, things like that, America's Most Wanted. They pleaded for information. I think that just reiterates that the family members were not involved, especially in my opinion. Police did not have enough evidence to draw a profile of a potential culprit. Asha's friends, other children, were interviewed by a child interview specialist, Kimberly Poyer. Nothing came of it, apparently. And now this is where things get crazy. We have to pause right here. This is where stuff gets like, this is some crazy crap, man. On August 3rd, 2001, I believe, what, 18 months or something like that after she disappears, Aisha's book bag, the item that was not located in the shed, Aisha's goddamn book bag was located about 26 miles away in a city called Morganton. We have Morganton, I believe, right here, which is in the opposite direction that Aisha was actually traveling. The book bag was found wrapped in a plastic bag. The book bag was found by a worker who was basically clearing like an area because there was supposed to be like a construction site or something like that. It's the information on that is pretty like choppy, I would say. It was preserved, and we also have the contents. Now the contents were actually released, I believe, only like this year, because police for 20 years did not tell us what was in the book bag. It contained a copy of Dr. Seuss's McElliot's Pool, which is a child's book, and that t-shirt depicting the New Kids on the Block, the boy band that we talked about earlier. Now this t-shirt, according to, now get this crap, man, these items, both the book and the t-shirt, did not belong to Aisha according to Aquila, which is, what is that all about? Like, what is this, man? This doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so basically the discovery of the book bag led detectives to believe that Aisha ran into foul play and her book bag was hidden on purpose by the culprit. Now, I'm thinking, why would they do that? Why wouldn't you just burn it? That's another thing I had here. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
yeah,
if I were just my 2 cents, I mean, sometimes people that do things like this, like by things like this, I mean, like maybe kill somebody, they take trophies. Like they take mementos. It's such a monumental thing in their minds. It's a thing that they had planned, and almost, just like how people hunt deer, and they, or other animals, and they keep trophies from that to memorialize the hunt. And I wonder that someone didn't do that at some point, and then for whatever reason had to give up the trophy or lost track of it, or someone else in their household found it and was like, "Oh, what's this? This is junk." Just threw it out, not realizing that the person they lived with, had been doing something devious like this. So that's my 2 cents.
exactly, man. Later leads have turned out to be dead ends. In 2004, acting on a tip reportedly received from an inmate at the county jail, the sheriff's office began digging at an intersection in Lawndale. The bones that were found turned out to be from an animal. The Degrees took steps to keep Aisha's memory and the case alive in the public's mind. In 2008, they established a scholarship in her name for the deserving local students, I guess. Um, we have that Aquila Degree lamented in 2013 interview with Jet that her daughter's disappearance had not gotten as much media attention over the years as some subsequent cases of missing children. She believes this was the case because she was an African American girl, and her quote is that missing white children get more attention. I don't understand why. She said, "I know if you ask them, they will say it's not racial." Oh, really? I'm not going to argue because I have common sense. I don't know, man. It's something that you speak a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned that. Like I said, I can kind of see both sides. So on one hand, I mean, maybe she has a point because, like in this case, their family is certainly like the kind of middle class family that has everything going for it, that everybody should be rooting for them. There's no like, oh well, this happened because you didn't do something correct or something wasn't right in your family. Like, from all we know, this is like a pretty baffling disappearance that happened to a good family. Now, I will say, yeah, in her case, like it does actually seem to be a valid argument. I would say that if she was talking about specific groups of people, specific demographics, it's a more complicated story because, like outcomes do vary across like whether somebody comes from not just, of course, it's not just the skin color is magically making someone care about them or not care about them, though you would at least hope not, right? You would hope that people would love all children. But sometimes, like, you know, people from some communities might come from a neighborhood or a background where there's more crime or more poverty or more like poor outcomes, like poorer parenting sometimes because not only are the parents working, but the parents, maybe have, substance problems and things like that. But yeah, like to her point, in this case, yeah, like I don't know, I never heard of this case, and I was around and I'd heard about like polycloss and some of these other cases that were, like kind of like the child's version of the missing white woman syndrome. So yeah, I mean, I have to really give her some credit here that for this case to not be as big as other cases, maybe she's got a point.
Yeah, exactly. In February of 2015, FBI announced, that they're looking back into this case. Reward money of 25 stacks were offered. Also, a community group is offering another 20 G's for information. So that's something interesting right there. People are offering money, offering dough for information. The FBI announced 15 months later in May 2016. This is what, remember when you said that how would she not get noticed, because she apparently was still at the shed, let's say, apparently somewhere around 2 hours before the police arrives on the scene. How would she manage to walk away unnoticed? Now, in 2016, FBI announces that their reinvestigation of the case had turned up a possible new lead. They disclosed that Aisha may have been seen getting into a into a dark green early 70s Lincoln Continental Mark IV, or possibly a Ford Thunderbird from the same era along Route 18, near where she was last seen later that night. It was described as having rust around its wheels. Now, it's definitely interesting, and I think it definitely could explain how she got not was not witnessed if she was entering into a vehicle, and potentially the vehicle could have been driving in the opposite direction from where she was heading. So she was heading towards Shelby. She may have gotten inside of a vehicle that was driving towards Morganton. I mean, that's definitely plausible in my eyes, and just because the police reported this sighting makes it pretty significant, because they got a whole bunch of tips, I assume, and they never talked about any of them. But in this case they talked about this particular tip, so I'm assuming it's pretty significant. And I'd be leaning towards that this actually happened. I'm thinking that actually happened. Now, before we jump into the theories, the last few points we have to mention that in 2017 the FBI announced that the child abduction rapid deployment team was in Cleveland County to assist in investigation. Cleveland County is pretty much not in Ohio, by the way. It's Cleveland County is, I believe, in North Carolina. The investigation and provide ground investigative technical behavior analysis and analytical support to find out more about what happened to Aisha. The team worked alongside FBI Charlotte employees. We have a whole bunch of people looking into it. Approximately 300 new interviews conducted in 2017, 2018. The Cleveland County Sheriff's Office detectives appealed for information from the public about two items of interest that were found in the Degrees book bag. So that child's book, and that T-shirt of the boy band that the family doesn't believe Aisha owned, because maybe she was like me, she thought that those guys were corny. In November 2020, an inmate named Marcus Mellon, who was convicted of sex crimes against children in 2014, wrote a letter to Shelby Starr claiming that Degree was murdered and he knows where to find her. These claims are under investigation and have not yet been verified. So that's pretty much all we have. One last thing I want to mention here, because I don't think we have it in the shared file, is that apparently Aisha was reading a children's book. Now, I can't really recall the name of that book, but that book sort of contained a story of a few children running away and starting their own like little adventure when they run away from the family home. And some people speculate she may have been, because she was a good reader, she read a lot of books apparently, and that she could have been inspired by that, children's book that she was reading to run away. Now, the cons for that potential theory is the fact that in that book, apparently a few kids run away. So she would have mentioned this most likely, at least to some of her basketball teammates, or maybe even her brother O'Brien. But she sort of vanished alone. And the children were asked and interviewed by that children interview specialist, and she couldn't uncover anything significant. So I don't think that was the case. I would sort of lean towards that she would have told some other kids about that particular thing. So that's all I have, man. We could get into the reaction part. I think you have a few really strong points you want to talk about in terms of theories and reactions. I guess some social things, some psychological things you want to mention. So I'll just leave it at your, leave it to you, I guess.
Yeah, and actually, even before, there was one last thing. Actually, I think you had it right in the end of the script here. It was interesting that, like you said, that this two items inside the backpack: the New Kids on the Block concert T-shirt and the Dr. Seuss book. And it's interesting because you mentioned the other book that she was reading that sounded like a more advanced age book, like something a fourth grader should be reading. Dr. Seuss does not seem age appropriate, but it is interesting that they said it was borrowed. The book was borrowed from her school in early 2000. It doesn't say how early in 2000, and that I think would make a big difference, right? Because if it was if it was taken any time after Valentine's Day, then that is a totally different story than before Valentine's Day in 2000. That makes a big difference. But I guess that the question is whether that really was a book that she had borrowed, and it's interesting they don't tell us that little factoid. You'd think they would know. Yeah, so I mean, getting into I guess what we always call our reactions part of the show. As I teased before in the introduction, it's super sad. It's super bewildering. I mean, you can't help if you were a parent or a parent watching this from the outside. It feels like a rejection, but not like a rejection like you take personally. It's even worse than that. It's like what would make this person do something so weird. And I think one of the first things that came to mind for me is well, there's a lot of what the heck was she running away from? So was it something real or was it something imaginary? So the real thing, I think, is something we've alluded to a couple times, and certainly at risk of not wanting to get sued by the family, but also because there doesn't really seem to be any evidence of this. It's not uncommon for people to be running away from some sort of abuse in their household. That's almost probably issue number one when it comes to teenagers or young children running away from their household, is they literally feel driven out, whether someone's abusing them physically or touching them where they don't need to be touched. Like I said, there doesn't really seem to be any evidence. I mean, there absolutely doesn't seem to be any evidence for this at all. Not even, no smoke, no fire, no scent, no hint of it. So, I mean, you almost want to, obviously those things can be very secret when they happen. So I'm not totally ruling it out, but I don't see any reason to, make those kind of insinuations about her parents. So I guess the other thing I thought about, in terms of what it could be is, I will be frank, there's a couple of ages for boys and girls, and they're different ages. So I always say the a-hole age, the idiot age for boys is right around 13. Like it's that transition age from being a child to being a teenager, or becoming a man. I guess that's it's also the age where you'd have your bar mitzvah or your bat mitzvah. But for boys, I've always noticed this. I mean, when I was in Boy Scouts and just my own personal observations, and I'm in my mid 40s now, so I've had some time to notice this. For girls, I would say 9 to 10, and our pediatrician has told us the same thing. 9 to 10 is the big age for girls where there's a lot of brain changes, and it's like kind of a worldview change. And I can't help but wonder if this is just where, it's also where potentially mental illnesses might start to also crop up, though we have no real indication of that. But yeah, it's enough that it does seem pretty strange. I mean, this behavior, in absence of a good cause, seems to be really strange for her to initiate it. And like I said, all the evidence is she had planned this, that she wasn't, you know, abducted from the front of the home. Because I think that's the next question is, well, if she'd had the internet in her house, it would have seemed a lot more likely that maybe somebody had lured her. Either somebody had pretended to be another child or another, like a boy or a girl, and had talked her into it, or like an especially charismatic and devious adult had somehow, kind of put these whisperings in her ear to do this plan, and I'll take you away, and you won't have your worries. And, you have to remember, this is before tablets and smartphones. The only electronic devices that could go on the internet back then were desktop computers, pretty much. I mean, most people didn't even have laptops at this point. Like you didn't have a laptop unless you were like an affluent person or a business person. So, I was trying to think like how else could she have even accessed the internet? Maybe her school, and I doubt it. You know what? Even back then, most schools weren't really on the internet, or if they were on the internet, it was just so bare bones and supervised that I can't imagine that anybody got to her that way. So then I thought, well, what else? Maybe her sports team, or you have to look like you have to kind of like say like what how else could someone even interact with this child socially to try to talk her out of it? So if it wasn't somebody at school, which once again there's no evidence of that at all, it's not impossible, but we don't have any sign of that. You would think other kids would notice. The only other thing I could think of was the team. So whether it was another kid on the team, or I think this is where I get to my next point. I really hate to say this because I know we're going to get some pushback on this, but I have a special level of distrust for any kind of organization in kids. It's really sad, but the fact is, even the church has turned up to have issues where anytime you have adults around a lot of children, there's always some small percentage of the adults involved, no matter how good-hearted the rest of the adults are. There's always some small percentage of monsters that take advantage of, let's say, unsupervised or, like not well supervised access to kids. And, this is me coming from, no joke, like the first, I don't know, 13 or so years of my life, after like age 6, were in scouting. So Cub Scouts and then Boy Scouts, and then I was an adult leader. And the fact is now Boy Scouts is getting sued into bankruptcy. The church has had all kinds of scandals come out, and sporting events and sporting organizations have had a lot of scandals too. I mean, there's been very prominent trials, including Olympic level athletes having been taken advantage of by their coaches. Now, this is not me saying that anybody in her organization took advantage of her, but what I'm saying is it is like a vector that some kind of action could come in through where someone might talk her into it. That being said, once again, it seems very far-fetched because you would think that if that was the case, that person wouldn't have her like hitchhiking her way across the countryside to pick her up someplace else. Like you would think like the car would be waiting. You know what I mean? When those things happen, like those things, there's been ones that have happened that I won't get too into, but yeah, like when those things happen, usually like that adult then absconds with the kid across state lines and has like a destination, and it doesn't seem to match that. So yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of, in terms of the initial theories, that was the sum of my collective thoughts so far, but I think I know that when we talked about this ahead of time, you had some pretty good and pretty interesting theories, and I really I wanted a chance to especially with the time we have left, I wanted a chance to kind of react to
Yeah.
what you would come up with in your research.
Well, first, let me react to what you just said. I'm just waiting until the beauty pageants go bankrupt, John Benny Ramsey, because, like,
Oh yeah.
think about it, man. Like,
Ugh.
20% of the people who go to the beauty pageants are not there to see who wins the competition, if you get what I'm saying. So, god
Yeah.
damn, let's
Yeah.
shut those things down, you know what I'm saying? Okay, maybe that's something that we could become famous for, shutting down the beauty pageants. Okay, let's get into the one dude that is really interesting. Now, I have two theories. I will definitely let you react to them at the end, so I'll just want to get to it now. One of the key suspects, at least on the media, maybe like the more new age media, YouTube videos, and I guess a lot of articles say that a man named Donald Preston Ferguson could have been involved in Asha's disappearance. He's a sick dude from North Carolina, and he did some sick stuff. So a little information about Donald Preston Ferguson. In 2014, he was convicted of murdering Shalonda Poole, who was another African American girl. She was 7 years of age in 1990, so 10 years before Asha disappeared, in the city of Greensboro. So people that were looking at this Google Earth, they probably noticed a few different other points we haven't talked about. They are linking up towards to Donald Preston Ferguson. So basically Greensboro, this area right here, in 10 years before Aisha disappears, Donald actually goes in, kills Sholanda Poole in Greensboro. So that's pretty interesting. He lived at that point in Spartanburg, so that's why people are thinking that he could have been involved, because he killed people 140 miles away from his home. And apparently Shelby is only like what, 30 something miles away, so he could potentially be killing people out in Shelby as well at that point. Now, let's get into some more interesting facts. Now, he is sentenced to 2 life sentences, and he was only found through a DNA match. Because remember when I said he killed Sholanda in 1990, he was only convicted of murder in 2014. So 24 years later, it's some really unfortunate thing that he got to stay out there and do his crazy stuff for 24 years, because he definitely did. It's some Golden State Killer type of a story. Actually, Ferguson knew the family and even participated in the search for Shalanda. That's pretty crazy, but we have seen that with potential suspects in like Madeleine McCann's case and things like that. They just like sort of become part of the search to sort of know what's happening and where the search is leading. It's actually a pretty smart tactic. If you kill a kid, you're gonna probably want to participate in the search a little bit just to see what's happening. So 1 year after Shalanda's murder, Ferguson was arrested, but not for Shalanda's murder. He was arrested for sexually assaulting a 10-year-old girl 1 year before he murdered Shalanda, so in 89. He got sentenced to 8 years in prison and was released in 1997. So he got released from prison 3 years before Aisha disappeared. And actually, we don't really know what he was doing from late 90s to late 2000s. We don't really have that much information on him, other than he was involved in like a lot of drugs, scams. He was defrauding banks and things like that. Now, Ferguson was known to live in the Spartanburg area, 38 miles away from Shelby, which I've said, which is pretty crazy. Um, you know, Pretty nearby, I would say. In July of 1990, Ferguson rapes and murders 7-year-old Shalonda Poole. I've already told everyone about that. Definitely an interesting fact that in August of 1990, Ferguson's grandmother is shot and killed. Let's remember this fact. It's gonna come back to the story. So Ferguson's grandmother is shot and killed. In March 1991, he pleads guilty to the 89 accusations and is sentenced to 8 years, released in 1997, 3 years before Asha disappears. Within 5 days of his release, Ferguson is arrested along with several members of his family for the murder of his grandmother. So 5 days after he got released, he's immediately rearrested. Now, 2 years later, in April of 1999, the charge was dropped, citing a lack of evidence. In 2007, so quite a bit later on, an investigator examines the Sholanda Pool case, because he didn't murder Sholanda Pool, but he only got booked for that in 2014. So in 2007, investigators that were examining the Sholanda's case, they see a photo of Donald Ferguson like helping out the family in the searches, and they're like, what? They're immediately looking at it. In August of 2008, 1 year later, Ferguson is in Gaffney and he is arrested for failing to register as a sex offender. So that's why I have Gaffney. So he was staying even closer to Shelby then. It's definitely plausible that he was involved at this point. Now, other facts about him is that in 2012, he's arrested for defrauding a bank, sentenced to a year, but it's actually chalked up to time served. In January of 2014, he's arrested for the murder of Sholanda after advancements in the DNA testing connected him to the murder. Now, there isn't that much information what he did from 99 to later 2000s because there isn't an accounting of Ferguson. Police reports that he was most likely involved in drugs, scams, fraud, and actually was homeless for a period of time. So it could make sense that he was actually on the same night was staying in the shed. You know what I'm saying? He could have been staying in the shed. He was homeless at some point. Now, we also have the fact that Sholanda's murder was pretty like creepily eerie in a sense that it seemed just as the same as Asha's disappearance. So basically, Sholanda lived in Greensboro, North Carolina, and Sholanda shared a room with her twin sister. At around 6 a.m., her sister woke up and noticed Sholanda was not in her bed. She saw her waiting outside and told her to come back in, but her sister declined, and that was the last she saw her. Now, she was lured out and murdered by Ferguson, who not only worked close to her school, but was close to her family and had spent time at their house in the few days before she was murdered. So he scoped out the situation, lured her, murdered her, helped in the search, and lived a wild life. Now he's serving 2 life sentences at this point. I will let you react to this story, but I also want to do cons for this story because I don't really believe that he was involved. Like, I think it's a possibility, but I'm not going to say that I believe that what's happened, because I don't think this crazy sick dude would preserve a book bag in Morganton. He has no connection to Morganton. I just don't see like him dropping off the book bag in Morganton. Also, he had no connection to the Degree family, and it seemed that everyone who he was like stalking in terms of like young children, he at least knew the families and had like a easy, quick connection to the children, so he could lure them out and things like that. So even though Asha's disappearance seems like it could have, like she could have been lured out, I don't think that Donald not having the family connection could actually do that. So I will let you step in and react to this theory, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he does seem to be a pretty good suspect for it. I would agree with you that if he was the person that did it, it would have to have been when he was doing something that was not his normal MO. So it would have to be almost like a crime of opportunity, like you said, like he was literally in the shed, like staying homeless, maybe just hopping from place to place looking for shelter, and it was just the worst luck ever that this random thing happened, and these two people randomly met. Because yeah, like to your point, it seems like his normal mechanic was to apparently socially engineer somebody to put themselves in a vulnerable situation, and I can't imagine how he would have done that with this case.
Exactly, man. And obviously, we have to talk about the last theory that I was really strong about, thinking about that was the case, but actually I looked into it a little bit and now I'm not feeling that strong about it, is the sleepwalking theory. This is for the people who are hearing this for the first time, they might think, yo, that could make sense. But, at the end, I will say why I don't really think it makes a whole bunch of sense. So basically, the pros for the sleepwalking theory is, why would Aisha pack random stuff in the book bag, and could it potentially be some nonsensical have sleep thing where she puts like random stuff in the book bag, like a book, like the t-shirt of that stupid boy band? Like, why would she put these things in the book bag? It doesn't really make that sense. She was scared of storms. Would she walk into a storm, and she was scared of storms and darkness, and she walked into darkness and into a storm? I could see that as a sleepwalking thing, because I don't really see how she would do that, in her right mind. Why would she go outside underdressed for the heavy rainstorm, in only a long sleeve shirt? Because it was raining heavily, and even if you're 9, you're probably sort of smart enough to realize that you need some better clothes. Now, why she really expected to not be heard when she left the home, she should realize that her brother would probably notice, and as he did. I think if she wanted to run away, she could have picked a better time, like maybe run from like a school or something like that, be better dressed, pack better stuff in the book bag, and not do it like in the middle of the night. At the middle of the night, she could be like sleepwalking. She could have went to the toilet already sleepwalking. You know what I'm saying? And then she got back into the her room, and she just started packing random stuff, because people usually sleepwalk to go to the toilet or something like that. So they go to the toilet while sleepwalking, and they go back to the bed, or like decide to take a nap in the kitchen on the floor or something like that. But they don't usually run outside of the house and walk like towards the city. Now that's one of the reasons why I think it's not all that plausible that she was sleepwalking. The other things that are pros actually for the sleepwalking theory are that there are actually no information released that would suggest her wanting to run away. So I just don't think that she wanted to run away. At least we don't know why she would. And then actually, children don't start running away from home until they're 12 usually. So why would Asher run away? Obviously, there are some cases where kids younger than 12 run away, but still, it really like narrows down the possibility of that even more so. And actually the cons, well, usually sleepwalkers only manage to do simple tasks. It's really hard to do what Asha did without actually waking up earlier in the process. I actually forgot one pro for the sleepwalking theory. Remember when I said that one of the drivers that spotted Aisha near Debbie Turner's upholstery business, he actually called her name. And what I've heard is that when there's a sleepwalking person, I'm not sure if this is like some hocus pocus like stuff that like old people in Soviet Union tell, but what I've heard is that when someone's sleepwalking and you call their name, they immediately wake up. I don't know, this could definitely be some hocus pocus Soviet Union stuff, but maybe that is the case. And then this driver calls for her name, she all of a sudden wakes up in the middle of the night, cold and wet because of the rain and stuff like that, and she doesn't know what's happening, and she runs towards the shed. So at least that would make some sense. So dude, that's all I have for this case. Yeah.
I'll just throw in my 2 cents about sleepwalking. So when I was a little kid, I had like some sleepwalking episodes, and I think to your point, yeah, usually, unless the only exception to this is, well, so usually, like you said, you can only do simple tasks. You're sort of like half fumbling around with things. The only time I've ever heard of anybody doing like complex tasks at least anecdotally, has been people on Ambien. Ambien seems to have some side effects of people sleepwalking and like literally doing a bunch of complicated things. Because it might be that whatever their version of sleepwalking is maybe a slightly different, like version of consciousness. But yeah, nah, I didn't wake up. Like think I could react emotionally. I think like when the cat, my parents' cat used to hate kids and like snarled at me because it was like the only time the cat would come out at night was when we were in bed, and here I come, sleepwalking. But yeah, it's just like even if you try to talk, you're kind of babbling. Um, the one thing I also like, so sometimes people use this and they say, I kind of wanted to tack this on that like, hey, like I think you and I are both on the same page that we think she ran into the wrong person. It has been thrown out there, including by somebody. There was a criminal that was trying to get leniency. I don't know how he thought this was going to get him leniency. Somebody that was trying to get like a better sentence claimed that it had been a hit and run and that her body had been disposed of in a lake or something. And I don't see how that would get you a better sentence. So that seems like to be typical, convicted felon logic. But I think my issue with the hit and run is the timing around all the cops and everybody racing around the roads and like just trying to scoop up a kid's body into your car and blood and whatever other evidence to be left behind. I mean, that's the other thing that's interesting, even with the running into the wrong person theory, is that there was no signs of struggle at the shed. So even if she ran into the wrong person, that person had to be like just super expert at somehow grabbing a 9-year-old and not leaving any sign of like struggle or blood or, even scrape marks or anything like that. Or they were convincing enough to somehow get this kid to come along with them. I don't know, man. It's super bewildering to me. But I mean, there's two mysteries, right? The first mystery is why'd she do it? And then the second mystery is what happened to her after she did it.
Yeah.
So, it's just like such a frustrating and I think heartbreaking case. And I really do feel for her parents and her brother and the rest of her family. I mean, this is like, what now, like 20 years later? I mean, if you look at the photo, that poster you mentioned on, the billboard that faces the highway, it has, I saw it on YouTube, it has a picture of her, and then they've aged her up, like on the hope, and the hope that maybe somebody grabbed her and somehow convinced her to kind of live another life, or somehow, brainwashed her, and that she might still be alive. But I don't know. The back of my head, I keep on thinking like, you know what, you're not going to need that second photo because she never made it that far, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
that's my closing thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be agreeing with you. Unfortunately, I don't think Asha is with us anymore. I think her life most likely ended shortly after she left, the home. So that was the case. Now, thank you guys for tuning in to the episode number 74 of the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. We really appreciate all the new listeners, everyone who's like tuning in for the first time. Maybe even leave a subscribe or a like on this episode on YouTube, and leave a rating at all of the podcast apps if you don't mind doing it. And obviously, if you enjoyed the show. Now, for the next week's case, we have a really persistent commenter, and he is suggesting a really cool case, which is the Delphi murders. And I think we already agreed in our recording little chat that we will be doing that case. Now, thank you to Bill Blass, who pretty much suggested that. Now I'm talking about probably not the guy who died in '02, the fashion designer from America. Some other Bill Blass suggested that. So thank you, dude. And we're gonna be doing that case, the Delphi murders, for next week. And yeah, guys, as always, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out.